are going to get started. We are going to try and... Hello. As I said, we do have more copies now, so if you need one, please feel free to go over there and pick one up. We are going to try to limit this workshop to 90 minutes, at the very most 2 hours, because we do have another meeting at 1 o'clock. So, welcome to the Uniform Compliance Workshop. We are here to address some of the items that have caused the most angst over the last 3 months. Namely, what is allowed in the front yard and in the front of your house. We want your feedback, and we will ask for it after each specific item as we discuss it. But before we get started, I know that we are all passionate about the subject matter. But please keep in mind that we are all neighbors, so let's treat each other with respect and courtesy. We are all here for the same reason: to do the right thing for our community and to maintain our property values. Please take this moment to silence your cell phones as a courtesy to others as we conduct business. I will introduce the people at the head table before I turn it over to Rex and Gary. Gary Clark is the chair of our ARC committee. Jim Coleman is the director. Rex Weddle is the vice president. I'm Candace Carroll. I am the president. Pat Carroll is one of our directors. Sandy Seaton is the COO. James Artiega is in charge of the compliance department, and Annalise Gamboa is our executive assistant. So we are going to get started here, and once we get to the part where we're asking for feedback, we will have people around the area that will bring the microphone to you. The only thing we ask is that if you can, please stand up so that we can see who's talking, since there's so many people in the room. Thank you. It's all yours.
Well, thanks for that big introduction. We're here today to talk about the guidelines that were the most confusing and, I guess, misunderstood when the enhancement of the compliance system was rolled out. At the board meeting, at the last board meeting, we promised that we would have 2 workshops this month to discuss this, and this is the first of those workshops. The next one will be on April 23rd. What time is that?
2.
It's in the afternoon. And it'll be set up on the same basis. Basically, we set that up for those who couldn't make it to this one, but certainly if you're passionate and want to come back and hear it all again, you're welcome. Let me have the next slide, please. So what's the objective of this workshop today? Well, the ARC committee has the full authority to amend the design guidelines with board approval. And there's really no limit on the scope of any changes they might decide to make. They could recommend almost anything, or they could recommend nothing, depending upon what they believe is in the best interest of the community and what meets their own mission statement for the committee to operate. They can be amended to remove any requirement or make any of them less restrictive than they already are. So they could either completely axe one of the items that might offend people, and then they might decide to make some adjustments in some of the guidelines to make them more easily understood or to make them less restrictive. So just many of you may not have been here for some of the other workshops we held in the fall before we rolled the new consistent compliance policy out. But we did that because the law requires the Sun City Anthem to enforce its governing documents in a uniform and consistent manner. And when we were considering doing this, we checked around to all of the larger HOAs in the area and found that all of them had the same kind of consistent and uniform policy that we were considering adopting. In fact, I think a few of them expressed surprise that we weren't doing it the way they were doing it. But what we found is, one of the reasons is that this is the fairest policy for all the homeowners. The past policy was kind of a reactive policy. What's the next slide, please? So it was reactive in the sense that upon a resident's complaint of a neighbor violating some of the guidelines, then that would trigger an investigation by the Community Standards Department to determine whether that allegation was correct or not. And I think last year we had maybe 900 of those kinds of complaints filed. About 300 of them were found to be not accurate, that there wasn't any violation involved when we actually went out and took a look at things. So about 2/3 of them were found to be actually a violation of one standard or the other. And then when the ARC committee meets in its review sessions, in its plan review sessions, which are required by the covenants, let's say you're painting your house, and probably all the painters in the area know that they've got to come before the ARC committee to get their plan for the painting of your house approved. Well, after that's done, there is an inspection by the Community Standards Department to make sure that the work was done and consistent with how the plans were established. So that's the other way that we managed to deal with possible violations of the design guidelines. So now the change in policy was really to have our staff conduct routine inspections to ensure that there's an uniform enforcement as required by law. And the purpose of the meeting today, next one. Oh, thanks.
What part is silent?
So I mentioned earlier that the reason we wanted to have this meeting today because we identified 6 basic situations that were the main thing that seemed to be misunderstood about our design guidelines, and they were the ones that maybe triggered the most alleged violations. And you can see them. You can see them enumerated here. Issues with trellises and arbors, pots in the front yard with live plants, the question of artificial plants being used, accessories or artwork attached to homes, patio furniture, and usually I think that's patio furniture in the front yard as opposed to in a courtyard or in the rear of your home, and landscape accessory features in front yards. So I'm going to ask Gary Clark, who's the chair of ARC, to run through these, and we're going to deal with these one by one. So what I'd like to do is once Gary explains what the situation is, he'll kind of summarize what the rule is with respect to each of these items. And then once we do that, we want to open it up to discussion by any of you on that particular item. So and trying to stay organized, because this will be a big meeting. There's a lot of people here and probably a lot of people who want to talk. So if we could keep that kind of organization in mind and deal with each of these issues one by one, I think we'll get through this in a kind of an orderly fashion. So Gary, why don't you talk about trellises and arbors, and tell me what an arbor is, because I know what a trellis is.
You know, before I get into this discussion, I'd like to see a show of hands. How many people here are the original homeowners? That's incredible. How many are people that actually acquired a home, second, you know, and good? Oh, that's even more. The community is in a situation right now where we've got a high turnover. There is confusion about our CC&Rs and our design guidelines. The ARC committee and the ARC planning committee is here to help you. As Rex mentioned, we found 6 common non-compliant issues. I don't believe anybody's been fined for non-compliance, and I also am being told, due to the process, that most of those have been handled and remedied without any due course or other situation. Trellises and arbors has always been an issue that's been addressed in the valley as a whole. Wood does not seem to hold up well. Some arbors are actually quite offensive. Some arbors are structurally sound. And the decision was made back in the 90s. I can attest to that. I was involved in the American Nevada's process, Pulte's process, and Del Webb's process to design a series of guidelines that preserves your property, as well as the community assets. One of the issues that came up was wooden trellises. As you can see, that's just one example. Wooden trellises require a lot of maintenance. They generally don't hold up. They dry rot in the heat. It actually forces the owner of the home to spend a lot of money to maintain the trellis. And we recommended wrought iron trellises and things like that. Not to be offensive, but if you're going to decorate the front of your yard and you want something architecturally pleasing and long-lasting, we felt that wrought iron components or other components that can meet the heat requirements of Las Vegas would be a complement to your home. Again, the guidelines were written to protect your property, your neighbor's property, the community property, and the community's assets. If our community declines, your home declines. We're not asking for blind uniformity, because the concept of Sun City Anthem from day one was to offer a variety of homes so that every homeowner could have the individuality that he wanted. So the second thing on there, they must be an open frame made of metal, wrought iron, or other material approved. They must be anchored solidly, and I'm going to have to apologize. I'm a victim of hay fever. So if my voice goes for a minute or my nose, plugs up and you can't hear me, raise your hand, scream, and I'll clear it and move on. The insulation on all walls, with the exception of the front of the house or casita, height may extend to the roof line. There are a lot of trellises, decorative wrought iron trellises in our neighborhood that people use for climbing vines, such as cat's claw, picantha, English ivy, and stuff like that. Wood will not support those. Yes, they will support it for a short term, but eventually they do fall off. Is there any questions about that one? Has anybody got? Yes, ma'am.
Wait. I'm sorry. So a trellis on the side of, a trellis on the side of the house is okay.
Correct.
All right.
Sir, we can't hear you.
A trellis on the side of the house is okay.
Correct.
I happen to live on a corner lot. And there's nothing that I saw in the guidelines that excluded that. So if you're on a corner lot and you have a trellis on the side of your house, that's okay?
Thank you for bringing up one of the examples that I know that we've had to deal with over a long period of time. Corner lots will be reviewed and by first the ARC plan review. If they agree with your application or they disagree, then it comes to the ARC committee. We look at it, we'll go and look at it. Corner lots present challenges, several challenges. If it's aesthetically complementing to your home, it meets the guideline requirement of the material constructed. In a lot of cases, we'll issue, I hate to use the word variance, because the moment you issue a variance, you open a can of worms, and so we have to document the reasons for the variance and so on. But corner lots, particularly a home that's visible from 2 or 3, a lot of the corner lots, we have the issue of the front of the house, side of the house, and the back of the house. And so that's a challenge. But the ARC Planning Committee and the ARC Committee is there to help you get that situation. And in most cases, I'm not going to say all, but in most cases, we're going to allow you to put up a nice, decorative, architecturally pleasing arbor. We're going to do that.
Okay.
Very seldom do we actually, I hate to tell anybody no. I've lived in this community. I started building my house in the spring of 2002. I moved in the summer of 2003. And like everybody, I want my house to be my house and decorate it. And I've had to, I'm your neighbor, I've had to abide by the same rules. And sometimes it's tough, you know. But for the most part, we're there to help you get that.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else got any other? Oh, there's a couple questions back there.
Please stand up.
Yeah, I bought this house secondhand, and we have some in the back wall. Is that considered something that needs to be approved?
The rear of the house.
Huh?
The back wall, he says.
On the rear wall, you mean on your backyard?
Yeah, in the backyard, on the back wall, I've noticed this. I've told my wife, she said, no, leave them, and now I can have
I
an
don't
excuse
think
to
we've
get rid
ever
of them.
had that issue come. Is it on the side facing your neighbor, or is it on the back facing
It's
the
on
back?
the back facing another house behind me, and it's made of wood and metal, and they're not pretty, but I didn't know if that's something that can get me a write-up. There's like vines in the back, there's different things like that.
From what you're saying, the way I understand it, and again without seeing it, but what you're describing to me is a trellis, a decorative arbor type or trellis type. You've got some type of climbing plant back there to decorate your back wall. I don't see a reason that would not be in compliance. Now, keep in mind, if you're on a golf course lot or an open lot, okay, then you don't have the 3-foot restriction.
Right.
So that would be, I don't see any restriction there. Do you, Rex, at all?
No, but, I mean, the guideline, excuse me. The guideline says it's the front of the house that we
Correct.
exclude any arbors and trellises on. So beyond that, it sounds like you've got a free rein to continue and enjoy whatever somebody put there before.
You mentioned other material for the trellis. What about a composite?
Composite material.
Let me, as an old engineer,
It's been there for 18 years.
I'm right behind you. Composites are an interesting material. We had this discussion the other day. The reason that homes in Sun City Anthem have hard shell foam as fascia and eaves is because they tried PT, they tried PT2, they tried composite materials, and the sun destroyed the material. Now, this was quite a while ago. Today, there are composites out there. But we have to review the specifications, because most composite material will work in Southern California, it'll work in Northern Nevada. You put it here, because Las Vegas is the test of many products, the composite won't hold up. Because it is, if you look at what the composite is made of, it's usually made of wood chips, a glue, a bonding agent, something wrapped in a vinyl clad or something like that. Even vinyl clad siding here has had numerous challenges and been dismissed in the building code. So we would look at, if you came to us with a composite trellis, we would look at it, research the material. Again, it would have to be architecturally pleasing. It'd have to meet the color requirements of your home, your palette in the community, and we'd take it under consideration. But if the product proved to be not worthy of the Las Vegas sun, I hate to tell you that, we would probably deny it.
Okay.
Or we'd give you, we'd suggest you use some alternatives. We'd never really deny somebody, there's a misnomer out there, if you want to call it. We never really say no. We usually say, based on the guidelines, we cannot approve your product, and we give you some alternatives, because we really do want you to have that climbing vine trellis that you want. We really do want you to have it. We just want you to put a product in that's going to last and increase the value of your home and not be a negative to the value of your home. So I'd have to see the product.
Okay. So we could bring it to the board, to the ARC, to show you what it is.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah, Ron, you could.
I could bring
Yes.
it to
Yes, you
the ARC to show you what the material is.
Yes, Ron.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I have a casita that's on a corner of a cul-de-sac, and I have trellises on the casita, and the trellises that I purchased are PVC with metal anchors going into the ground. And I have several $100s invested in this, and I just want to know why the PVC would not be acceptable. And also, if in a situation like mine where every single side of the casita is visible by some section of the roadway, you know, I mean, I have it maintained by my landscapers, and it looks nice. I don't understand what the problem is. Even though the picture that they took of it is actually the side of my casita, not the front. So I'm just confused, and I hope that you can clear things up for me.
I hope I can answer that question, because let me address PVC, polyvinyl chloride products. If it has a sun-resistant factor, a UV factor added to it, some PVC products will stand up. Mm-hmm. Most PVC products don't. So you end up getting tanning, and once PVC starts to tan, it becomes very brittle, and it loses its structural and tensile strength immediately. And once the tanning process starts, your only remedy is to paint it with a PVC-approved paint. We'd have to look at that. PVC is being introduced into the valley, particularly through the various outlets, Home Depot, Lowe's, as trellises. I don't think we have addressed that issue yet of PVC trellises, have we?
In the subcommittee, there have been a few homeowners who came in with PVC trellises, and they were approved.
Yeah.
She was addressing that it's on the side of her casita and not on the front, but the inspector is looking at the front face of the home. So if your casita's front door of the casita happens to be on the back or on the side of it, he's looking at the front face. So even if that trellis is on the front face of the home, well, it's on the side of the casita, but it's on the front face of the home facing the street, it's still considered as the front face of the home.
Even though, since I have a corner lot of a cul-de-sac, every single side of my casita can be seen either from the road or the cul-de-sac.
Yeah, that's not the issue, because there's tons of trellises that are on the side of the homes that can also be seen from the street, and those will not be written up. But it's just anything on the front face of the home when you're looking at the front face of the home.
So I think you've identified kind of one of the problems that we've got and that we want to look at. And that is, are any of these guidelines inartfully drawn to the point where they're confusing? And certainly casitas on, or houses or casitas on a corner lot raise that question, because the guidelines very specifically only refer to the front of the house. And if violations are being counted against people with sides of the casitas or the sides of their house having decorative stuff, then we've got to fix the guidelines so that they're clear as to what's allowed and what isn't, because you're confused, right? And so one of the objectives of this is to try to go back and look at those guidelines and remove some of that confusion we identify.
Well, my other concern is I don't understand why there's a problem with the trellises to begin with. I mean, as long as they're maintained well and they look nice, I don't understand why that's a problem.
I understand. And I think it's just the question of the materials holding up under the conditions we have here. So
trellises really aren't a problem. We just want to make sure that the trellis that you erect can stand up to the rigors of the Las Vegas sun temperature.
I totally understand.
And again, your home, you have a corner home, a corner lot. As I mentioned earlier, your home is one of the unique properties we have. And so your home would actually get special attention. One of us from either the ARC planning or the board, and James, we would go out and look at your property. Generally speaking, the front of your home is the front that faces the street that your address is called out on.
Yeah, that's not the situation. The front of my home faces the cul-de-sac. You know, because it's
a cul-de-sac, but you said you're a cul-de-sac corner, so yeah. Your house would be one of those ones we'd have to look at.
Hey, Judy. Oh, sorry. Judy, did you have a question back there? Back in the back row. Oh, I'm sorry. You were already back there. I thought you were, okay.
and she has one.
Okay.
Okay?
Hi, I'd just like to say first that that picture is really misleading. That's not a trellis, that's debris. And it looks like it's been reinforced 2 or 3 times.
It was a trellis.
My aunt and uncle had bought their house in 98 or 99. The original landscaping has honeysuckle solidly attached on a wooden trellis, solidly attached to the wall, and it is still there. And the wood is still in good shape. It's not where a place where it gets wet and dry, which is really what promotes rot. And it's in great shape. If I had not trimmed the honeysuckle last year, I didn't even know it was a wooden trellis or what was holding the thing up. So I just think there's a little bit of overreach on this stuff.
Well, let me ask you a question. Did you get a non-compliance issue?
No, I have not. I don't.
So I'm going to say that Trent, when he went by your property, looked at that because it was, it was not in disrepair. You had honeysuckle vines growing up over it. He obviously couldn't tell what material it was, and therefore, I'm not going to say you're in compliance, but you're not in non-compliance either.
Oh, no, I don't believe I am. I'm just saying that
wood is a unique.
No, I mean when you put out that all trellises have to be this, you're not saying that if it's in disrepair, it has to be replaced with this. That's different, and that's why I think part of the reason people are so upset is because something that's been on their house for 20 years is suddenly, well, maybe I can't have that. Do you understand what I mean? That's just my point. I mean, mine's still in good shape, and I'll just let the honeysuckle grow back over it, and nobody else will know what it's made of, right?
We had the very same issue years ago talking about fascia and eaves, because, of course, the builders wanted to continue using PT and PT2, but the inventory of properties in the valley showed that it wasn't holding up. And so they fought tooth and nail before the county changed their building codes. And now you'll find that it's a different product used for fascia and eave. And most homes now being built in the valley are using hard cell foam that are stuccoed over to meet the fascia and eave requirement. The fact that excuse me again, it's my allergy. The fact that your trellis has survived, it's probably, I'm going to say it's on an inside wall somewhere. It's not facing the street. Am I correct?
That's correct.
And I'm even going to go a little further. Is it in an area where it doesn't get direct sunlight? It probably gets shade and partial sunlight?
It's partial.
Okay. You're one of those exceptions we love, because in your case, your wood survived. There are dozens. No, I'll take that back. There are hundreds of examples. This is just one of the sun-destroying wooden trellis.
I think one of the objectives here is to identify these areas that are unclear, so that we can go back and make them clear. So
right, exactly, and that was my point.
So, and you illustrated it very well. Thank you.
Correct.
And I think we're going to have a hard time getting through this before dinner if we go into too much detail on everybody's specific problem. We're really looking for issues that you have with the rule from the standpoint that it is either you don't understand it, or you do understand it and you don't like it, I guess, is the other aspect of that. So who else is next here?
Good morning. I can't stand up. I have a brace on my leg. I have a steel arbor on the side of my garage in the front of my patio, which was there when we bought the home 4 years ago. And it's got carnations all over it, whatnot. I want to know if that's legal or not, if it's metal, if it's steel.
Sounds like it.
I got a letter.
What was the alleged violation then?
That there was an arbor there.
The arbors are only allowed in the rear yard per the design guidelines.
Okay. Well, I don't agree with it. I don't think it looks bad. I think if people are maintaining them, I get that. If they're not maintaining them, like that trellis, it definitely is a trellis. I just don't think it's fair.
Well,
it's something that should be discussed.
And that's something we want people to talk about. If they think, for instance, that ought to be liberalized, that's one thing the committee needs to look at.
Yeah, again, if you're not maintaining it, absolutely, get letters out. I understand that.
Right.
But if you've got it maintained, you have nice plants on it, then...
I understand the point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to change the subject a little bit, if that's permissible.
About what?
It says here that the ORC has full authority to amend the design guidelines with board approval, and there's no limit on the scope of any changes. So if you're going to be making recommendations, I'd like to find out if there's any consideration regarding the height of trees. When we moved in 12 years ago to a new home.
Can I ask you a favor? I'd like to stay on the point at the very end. If people have other issues unrelated to the
Correct.
6 items we're talking about,
Yeah, but you said we're going to be here till dinner.
it'll make it easier for us to deal with it. And if you want us to look at that particular item, we'll do it eventually. If you want to send us a note, or if you want to come back on the 23rd, we'll deal with it then if we can't get to it today. If we can't deal with it, just.
Can I just finish my comment, and then if you don't want to address it, I understand. Let me all right?
But I would love to deal with any other issues we can at the end when we get through the items that are of most concern to the most people, is my point. I'm not saying that, I'm just saying that the tree issue wasn't numerically one of the
You don't even know what I'm going to say yet.
The confusion.
You don't even know what I'm going to say yet. I just want to say that when we moved in 12 years ago, there were requirements as far as how many bushes, how many trees, and the height, and we complied with everything. By the way, I didn't get any non-compliance letters on any of these issues, on anything. But what's happened is there's been no thought to addressing what happens in the future. We're a 20-year-old community, and the trees are getting larger and larger. There are people, not in my case, but there are people that are back-to-back on the same level. In my case, we have a drop of about 20 feet, and the trees behind us are coming up to the rooftop heights, and I'd just like to know if the ARC will be making any recommendations to the board about adding something to the guidelines requiring trimming of trees. They overlap our properties. We have to pay to trim the neighbors' trees. I'm also concerned about the root structure compromising the efficacy of the party walls, which are responsibility of both parties, and I don't want to be in a position where I have to pay to restore a wall that was destroyed by the roots of the trees from the people below me.
All right, so we'll
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll add that to the list of things to be looked at.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the time to speak.
I've got a good friend that bugs me about that all the time myself, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Thank you very much.
I have a real problem with the letter I got. I was told I was supposed to put a perforated metal screening inside my gate. I have a piece of metal there that is for rabbits. I have rabbits that come into my courtyard. They sit on my plants, they eat. They even go to my cactus plants, and they're chewing at the bottom of my Mexican pipe cactus. This is a matter of preservation of the rabbit population. However, it is doing an extreme amount of damage to my home. And I received a letter, an additional fine of not exceeding $100 per violation may be imposed, as well as a possibility of suspension of a unit owner's right to vote for a reasonable period of time, and or the suspension of the owner's right to use any of the association's recreational facilities within the common area. And this is the type of hate letter I received for trying to protect my property, and it's excessive.
Thank you. I'll make a note of that.
Yes, on the trellis issue.
Oh, we have a person that would like to talk there. Go ahead, Judy.
On the trellis issue.
Linda, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would just like to understand, what is the basic objection to a wrought iron trellis on a front-facing wall?
So,
a trellis in the front-facing wall.
Trellises can be used, but you can't put it on the front of your house. What's the thinking behind it? Why is that?
I'd have to, on that issue, I'd have to go all the way back, but generally we allow trellises on sidewalls. If you have a courtyard, on both sides of the courtyard. If it's facing the street, it's a different issue. Only because we have guidelines. This meeting is here.
Well, that guideline could be changed.
You know, I showed this to Rex. And I'm going to read this, and it's probably going to bore every one of you, and I apologize for that. But I was on the committee almost 20 years ago that came up with these guidelines. And these are the core elements of the guidelines. Now, you can object to that, and you can disagree with it, but here are the core elements. And as I read these 3 short core elements, you're going to find that nowhere does it state anywhere that the design guidelines or the covenants are adversarial, restrictive, and want to deny you any improvement and individuality of your home. And let me read them to you so each one of you can do it. Number 1, this is about the CC&Rs and the design guidelines. Number 1, core ideology. To operate and function with the core goal of maintaining all property values of our community's assets and all of our residential properties. Again, your residential property is a core value. Number 2, to ensure that the community does not decline in its appeal among current property owners as well as prospective future retirees wanting to relocate to our community because of the beauty of and the facilities offered by our residents. Why did we make that a core? Again, to protect your home's value. If our community declines, it becomes unruly. I don't know how many of you visit HOA communities in the Valley. We are the premier community in the Valley. You can argue that point, but the facts in the audit and the state audit say we are the community, we are the premier community. Our community is recognized for its beauty, its facilities, its cleanliness, its governing body, the way we take care of our property. We are here to protect your home's value. You might not like with that process, but your home's value is our key. The last point, to foster an environment of unity, harmony, cooperation through participation, your participation, and an ideology of community enhancement to protect our citizens, your home, investment in the lifestyle, home, and environment that they chose to live in. From those 3 core ideas, everything that was developed in the design guidelines had to meet the core ideology. None of this design guidelines is meant to be offensive, restrictive, adversarial, or anything. This workshop is an example. This workshop is an example of your community's board and the ARC committee wanting to hear your input. We're going to have a second workshop. The guidelines can be amended. So the Linda, guidelines can be changed to meet today's material and requirement. But it's a process. It's not an event. We're not going to throw a light switch and tomorrow afternoon all of this is going to be changed. It's a process.
Linda, you raise a good point that actually is going to be tackled under the very last one, which has to do with things on the front side of the house. And I think this is the biggest problem we have, is that there's an awful lot of stuff that we could put on the front of our house that doesn't appear objectionable or whatever. And I think we need to have that discussion about whether what is reasonably permitted under those circumstances. And so, and I think in your situation, you got kind of a double issue. It's an arbor and it's on the front of your house. So I don't know which one's the problem. But okay, it's a trellis. Okay. So, but I think that comes under the last discussion on the list here, and which is I think going to be the most interesting thing to talk about is what people think is not objectionable and should be allowed, and what stuff we still need to be able to police against that would be negative to the community. So I'd like to. Okay, Pat wants to say something.
I was just going to say, I think what we wanted to hear today were recommendations about what changes could be made to the design guidelines, and I think we're beginning to hear some suggestions having to do with the fronts of houses, in particular now trellises, possibly down the road some other changes for the fronts of homes. So that's what we're here to get, are your recommendations for changes. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So,
yeah.
To help this go along, can we move down the list now?
Sure.
Yeah, we can move from trellises.
Let's go to number 2.
Pots number 11. Pots.
Has anybody here got pots in their front yard? There you go.
Would you like to?
Don't feel bad, I have some too.
Go ahead, read the
On this one, pots and live plants. Pots with live plants may be located in the front entryways, courtyards, rear yards, and on a case-by-case basis in areas pre-approved by the ARC. Why is that provision in there? We put that provision in there to allow a case-by-case review.
No, get your mouth a little closer.
Oh,
to the
you
microphone.
skipped down to, oh.
No. Can't hear you very good.
Well, I'm at the example right there.
No. Get closer to the microphone.
Oh, my
so
God.
they can hear you.
Again, my voice is falling apart. So, as we can see, technically this is a pot. I don't think you'd want that in your neighbor's yard. I could be wrong. And I certainly don't think you'd want that in your yard. I mean, actually, the tires are pretty bad. So what we did is we look at pots on a basis.
But sorry, could people stop talking while we're trying to make the point here, and then we can talk once we're through.
We look at pots individually. There are some very nice architectural pots out there. We have an example and a photograph of a Kentucky Fried Chicken basket being used as a pot in the front yard. I don't think that you would approve that. I don't think you'd put it in your front yard. So we looked at this line item. We're concerned about the quantity of pots and how they're put in and installed, and if they got live plants, are they properly irrigated? Is there proper drainage away from the house? Little things like that that the Plan Review Committee looks at. Quantity was our big concern. We obviously didn't want a front yard with 15 or 20 different pots all over the place. And I think we did restrict it to 5. Am I not correct on that, James?
At this point in time, there's no limit on the amount of pots you can have out.
Correct.
Just in the placement. And that's why the ARC will be looking into adding that to the landscape accessory
Correct.
item where there's a limit of 8.
We have a division called landscape accessory and pots. In many cases are both an art form and they're also a landscape accessory. So we have to look at its function.
So the key to this rule is the fact that it says that these are pre-approved by ARC. So, remember, you're supposed to bring any accessories, et cetera, that you want in your yard to ARC for pre-approval. And this is an area that they pre-approve the aesthetic application that you want to use out there. So the process works pretty good if you come in and sit down with the plan review people at the ARC subcommittee and get pre-approval for whatever your design ideas are. And as Gary said earlier, they're fairly reasonable with respect to working with you on a design that makes everybody happy. You want to go on to the next one, Gary?
I have a question over
Oh,
there.
I'm sorry, yeah.
She's coming.
I'll just speak loud.
Thank you.
Can I get a write-up on a single pot with rows of that?
No, we can't hear you.
Hi, I didn't get a write-up on, we have a single pot, irrigated, and with a rose bush in it, very nice. It was there when we bought the place, so I have no idea if the previous owners had pre-approved. Like I said, I did not get a write-up on it. Can I ignore it? Do I have to go back and send you guys something, or how does that work?
I'm going to guess. I don't have fact. Maybe James can add a. If they're in the inventory process, when Trent went around and inventoried the properties, all of the homes, if he did not give you a non-compliance letter, he looked at it and felt that there was no issue. I'm speculating purely. James can look your property up and find out if it was included in the inventory. And if it was and you didn't get a letter, then you're fine. Oh, you got other letters? Oh,
right,
darn.
thanks.
I thought we were really going good there,
Let's go on to artificial plants then. Nobody else has a question that? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry.
Hi, I'm an original owner of my home. I've been here since 2001. I affirm my support of keeping the property values up. I do have an issue with the 2 words up there, uniform and consistent. I got my citation. I hired someone to remove my pots that were on a courtyard wall next to my gate. And then I look around and my neighbor across the street and another one on the street has the same pot arrangement. They're still there. I asked the woman, didn't you have to take that down? She says, oh no, my husband went over and talked to him and it's legal. So my point is, if you're going to be uniform and consistent and you make a rule, it should be for all, not one. If all we have to do is ask you, then why don't you just assume that we asked you and we're all okay and skip that one?
I don't know if James wants me to address that issue, but I'll ask Rex for permission.
No, I understand your point. When people come back after they get a violation and they work things out from the standpoint of what was this about, and there's some explanation involved, then it goes right back to the fact that had all this been done previous to the improvements to your yard or whatever, the approval would have already been there for it is the problem. So I think in this situation, they're getting that pre-approval that they didn't get before by coming out and having somebody look at it and say it's all right. All right. Well, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I understand.
We are a community that has a tremendous art ability. We have art all over the place. We're in the Southwest, where wrought iron is very popular. We have homes that it aesthetically would bring up, not bring down, okay? And all of a sudden, we can't decorate the houses that we live in. The houses that in my community, where I got a letter for a wrought iron basket that was sitting in the front of my house, and the neighbor has a frog on her window, and the frog is still there. There's a motorhome that's been in his driveway for almost 2 months, and it's still there. I mean, you're coming after people for nonsense. You live here. We are all volunteers. I am president of a group here too, okay? So I get the same paycheck that you do. And I get the same aggravation that you do also from my members. But we all want to make our houses our houses. If someone has an overgrown lawn or a front, go after them. Don't go after me for a basket.
All right. So a little later we'll be talking about artwork and those type of things.
But you know, if someone wanted, what do you call it, to paint those the color of their house, and they're artistically inclined, it may look very good in their house, and they want it because they like it, and it doesn't bother me as their next door neighbor.
Okay.
Why would it bother you?
All right, so you're saying we should have no guidelines at all with respect.
There are guidelines. Go after the things that make sense.
No, I'm talking about
the rose bush that's falling off, the overgrown, the leaves, the RVs that are in their driveways for months at a time, things that are important, safety issues, the dog crap, thank you, that's all over the place. The people that walk their dog on my rocks, and I'm talking to them and they say, oh, I'm sorry, let me just pick it up here. Walk the dog on your property. Walk the dog in your backyard. I have a dog here. It's a service dog. I walk my dog where I live, not where you live. That's important.
That's not a design guideline.
This committee is looking for input from the community as far as making changes.
Yes.
And there are some models. I happen to live in a Lexington model. It has a 2-foot ledge under the front window, ideal for a window box. I think the committee should look at what would work on a long-term basis for a window box in particular models. If I don't have a window box or something there, it's going to look bare.
I understand, and that's a good point for the committee to look at. I mean, all the homes were practically designed with that type of a ledge in front of their house.
Oh.
I just I'm really surprised. I mean, we all moved here because we wanted an HOA that had some rules and some. There is no telling how much there is bad taste amongst people, and they think a line of their pots all along a wall is pretty, but they're all different. I don't agree, and I like the standards of let's not have pots all over the front yard. There are a lot of people who will put a pot out Chinese or clay or Mexican, and they have plants in them, but suddenly the plants die. The pots don't go away, and they're just sitting out in the yard. And there are a lot of yards. I walk around my neighborhood. Unlike you, I don't think I have to stay in my yard. I walk the neighborhood to enjoy it. And I think some rules are good, but for people to be arguing that they want to change this and change that. We moved in, we all saw the CC&Rs. I just don't understand why everybody's so angry. If we moved here, we knew what we were getting into. And you think now, I don't have to follow your rules. I just think there's some sensible changes, absolutely. But let's not get crazy. People should not have tons of pots on their front yard. That's my personal opinion. If it's in your courtyard, that's fine. But not along the walls, not all scattered around your yard. And I've seen a few now who evidently they must have had a complaint put against them because they're gone. And they look so much nicer. I mean, the yards look so much cleaner. This is what we came here for, established rules, and let's not get crazy like this lady who says, I want to paint my house the way I want to paint it. This is not why we moved here. Okay, that's my statement.
Any other questions about pots?
One more, I think.
Let's go to artificial plants if we can.
I would just like to clarify. I live in Cambridge. I'm an original homeowner. I have a courtyard. I have a gate. I have 2 pillars, one on either side of the gate. I've had pots there, one on each pillar, that I plant with geraniums. I did not receive a letter, but I want to clarify that that is okay since we have a lady who did get a citation.
Well, there's a rule that comes up later when we're talking about landscape accessories. We'll talk about what goes on those pillars. Okay. So we're going to cover that a bit later, as soon as we move to another guideline.
Are you going to be putting this information in some form of a letter or in the Spirit magazine for those of us who can't stay for the entire meeting?
You mean a summary of what we talked about? Yeah, it'll probably be, I'm not sure which Spirit edition it'll be in.
SCA TV is here filming our workshop, and so it'll be up on the website shortly after, like in the next day or so that you could view the whole workshop.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving
All right.
on to artificial plants.
Shall we move to the
Artificial plants.
artificial plants?
Yes.
Oh, we have somebody. Is this a question relevant to artificial plants? Oh, good, because we're there.
Speak into the microphone.
Oh, apparently my voice is fading and nobody can hear me, which is unusual. Artificial plants are prohibited from being planted in the ground or placed in planters in any location of the yard. They are allowed in the front entryway and rear patio planters. They are also allowed on the rear patio, and they may be used in hanging baskets in your covered patio or something. They are allowed in planters behind solid courtyard walls, not to exceed the height of the solid wall. Is there anybody here that questions artificial plants in the sun? I mean, do they understand why this was implemented? Here we have a lady over here.
Anybody want to speak about artificial plants?
Right here? Oh, she's coming from
I don't know who has
right.
the mic.
Just talk. Okay. I got one of those violation letters. I have a Madison, and I have a front porch and a little portico.
Mm-hmm.
When I moved in 6 years ago, there were 2 little hooks up there. 5.5 years ago, I put a basket with artificial flowers. It looked beautiful. Nobody complained about it. It's been there for 5.5 years. Out of the sun. And all of a sudden, I get a threatening letter that if I don't take it down, not only like the other woman, that I wouldn't be allowed to the club, but that they would put a lien on my house for one artificial basket up there that's been there for 5.5 years.
Well, I think you make the point that if we'd had the consistent enforcement 5 years ago, that wouldn't have been there for 5 years.
They're around all over the neighborhood. I moved mine.
I understand. I understand.
I think it's ridiculous for a basket that you can hardly see from the street.
This is what we want to talk about. We want to hear from people with respect to what limitations.
But why not? You saying you understand everything. Why didn't this workshop go on before the letters went out?
We did.
Why did we all get threatening letters?
Well, we had. Excuse me. We had 2 workshops in October, November, to talk about guidelines.
You discussed flags, and then you changed your mind about that.
Excuse me, if you'll let me finish, I'll tell you what we discussed.
I understand.
We finished. We discussed anything that the members wanted to bring to our attention then, after we sent out the notices that we were going to have a consistent application of our guidelines enforced. And we did not hear that particular point raised at that time by anyone, that this was a problem. And we were also encouraging people, because they had the guidelines, to do their own self-enforcement, to check their property to see if anything they had might be in violation of the guidelines.
Well,
now,
you're saying that the property goes down. My property has doubled in the 5.5 years.
So I understand now that this is an issue. That's why we're talking about it here. And I want to hear from people what their views are on the use of artificial flowers or plants in any circumstance, whether it's behind a courtyard or in front of your house or hanging from a basket or sitting on that little ledge out there.
But you're saying if I go to the art committee, I might get approval for it, but my neighbor 2 houses down may not?
No, I'm not saying that about artificial flowers. I'm saying for potted plants, there was a provision that if you got pre-approval from ARC, you could have them in your yard. Artificial plants currently have no latitude in that respect. That's why we want to talk about it. We know.
But you're putting desert landscaping in to save on water. This pot takes no water at all.
Well, I understand. That's a good point. I understand that. And that's a point that we should think about. I agree. Now I want to hear from other people here whether they feel the same way you do or not.
Oh, we have one over there.
Hello, I disagree. I am totally against any artificial plants that are viewed from the public, because I'm from Southern California, and I believe a lot of those neighborhoods that had colored pots, they don't maintain them. Artificial flowers, artificial plants, I used to love them inside, that's different, or in a private area, but in the front yard or the front porch where I can see it, I'm against it.
Does anybody...
Any other? Let's get some comments here. Anybody else have their hand up on that?
We have one more comment over here.
Over here? Oh, right there. Standing by.
Pat Hayes, Gulf Mesa. Been here since '02. Quick. You've heard many comments, advice about the tone and type of letters that are being sent out. Strongly recommend you review those. We're all adults. We're all friends.
Hey, Rick.
There's more people want to talk here.
Since this gentleman brought that up, I wanted to mention, I was horrified when I heard what were in those letters. I have investment homes here in Vegas, 2 other homes that have HOAs. And every now and then I get a copy of a violation notice that has gone out. And none of them contain the kinds of threats and impositions that are in these letters. They're kind. It's a first initial notice. We want to keep our property values up. This is a violation. Please take care of it. Notify us within blah, blah amount of days. And then, if it isn't taken care of, further steps will be taken. They are polite and non-threatening. And I highly, highly encourage our homeowners association to take that stance.
Thank you. Oops. Wendy, wait a minute, they went that way.
Yeah, they went that way. I have a question. It seems like a large problem people are talking about are artificial flowers with poor maintenance, trellises with poor maintenance. Could we accept those things in our guidelines, and then the cutoff for violation letters would be when something is not maintained, when artificial flowers are dead and withered and broken from the sun, or when trellises are not maintained and falling down in a pile of debris. To me, that makes sense. I don't know if it does to anybody else.
Yeah. Wendy?
Hi. A lot of you don't know me, but I used to be the general manager here at the time that we were transitioning to homeowner control. So forgive me, I want to ask about process or talk about process. I can understand if the first letter that went out was quoting the law, because all of you who are complaining about the letter, that's required by law before you could be fined.
Correct.
Or there could be any enforcement. Has to be in the letter. So my question is process. Do we have a courtesy notice? No. Aha. Okay. My recommendation is a courtesy notice. Very friendly. It says courtesy notice at the top. Dear homeowner, you may not be aware of this, and make it very nice. Then there's a formal letter. Then there's a hearing letter. That's my recommendation.
Thanks, Wendy.
Very much.
Yes, we've been talking about a number of issues here that people have bought the places and they've had some violations with them, or violations have inadvertently been put in their property. I would like to suggest some sort of common sense rule. And a common sense rule that comes to my mind is if a artifact has been installed, and let's say there's no official courtyard, or an artifact has been installed on the front face of the house or something like that, if the neighbors haven't complained about it, if it's been there for X number of years, don't make it a violation. To me, that would be common sense. If the neighbors are complaining about it, it's possibly because it's deteriorating property value. But most of us are interested in keeping our property values up. That's my suggestion.
Thank you.
Can I address
Thank
that?
you.
Well, can I address it? Okay.
Thank you. Hi. I don't know, inside the house we have some live plants, we have some artificial, we have a bowl of fruit on a table. People come up to the bowl of fruit and they want to eat it, and they find out it's plastic, and they're right there with arm's reach. I'd like to know if artificial plants on the property 30 to 50 feet from a sidewalk or a roadway can be ascertained that it's not real unless you trespass on the property.
Any other artificial plant people?
I kind of like to ask if, in fact, all of the letters for compliance have been sent out and we're complete with people who are in non-compliance. Are we done with that? I have to go further than that, but I want that as a basis to know.
The first quarter has been completed, and all 7,144 homes have been inspected for the first quarter.
And have all of the violations that have been attributed to individual homes, have they been complied with?
Have they been complied with? No.
No. So there are still some outstanding homes.
Definitely.
Because I would like to know if people aren't complying and I find something offensive in my neighborhood, what procedures do I follow if, in fact, these people are continuing not to comply?
You can still report any violation that you see. We're not completely just the
For years. Actually, this home has been in non-compliance and has been allowed to get away with it under Section 4, I think it's C1, the front yard landscaping. And it was brought to my attention that it was because of religious inclinations that this was allowed to stay. And I don't feel that's a basis for anything.
Yeah, no, I've been here for 8 years, and I have not heard of anyone being allowed to keep any type of landscaping or not have landscaping for religious purposes.
Yeah.
I would have to look into that property.
Well, I would like to
and
bring
then-
your attention to, at some point,
Yeah, definitely.
somebody that is in major violation of what I just said.
Definitely do that.
4C.
But yeah, definitely not all of the homeowners are in compliance now. There are still
It hasn't been
many open
addressed for
violations.
years. It hasn't been addressed for years.
Thanks.
All right, we'll look at that.
Okay, let's get to artwork. Yes, artwork.
All right, let's go on to
Let's go on number 4.
number 4. Did you have an artificial plant question?
I just have a question. Seems to me that everybody's problems could be solved if you just went back to how it was. As Gary said, we were premier before, we're still premier. Why change it from reactive to proactive? Just leave it alone. It was that way when we bought it. That was our agreement. That was our contract. Why change it?
I'd love to address that one.
All right, let's move on to accessories and artwork.
I'd like to address that as we get to the end of this, and I can tell you exactly why as we move on. Number 4, which is, of course, accessories or artwork attached to the home. Accessories or artwork attached to homes are limited to entryways and the side or rear of homes. They are prohibited on the front of the home of the home being the side of the house that faces the street. 2 accessories in the front entryway and 2 in the rear of the homes are allowed. An example is that right there. That would be considered artwork, not a landscape accessory. And I know we've had the discussion, James and I have had the discussion that Del Webb, Pulte, when they built these homes, they actually put artwork in some of the eaves of the houses. That is physically attached to the structure. It is appurtenant to the structure. Removing it requires damage to the stucco and element. Those, because the builder installed those, they're part of the architectural feature. We find artwork, the beauty of artwork, and that's been a tough thing for us to rule on. The beauty of artwork is in the eye of the beholder. The person who bought it, obviously, it's a treasure, and they want to put it on the house. The neighbor might look at it and call it the most atrocious thing they've ever seen. And they don't see it the same way. So to eliminate that debate, and remember, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. To eliminate that debate, we rule that we cannot put artwork on the front of the house. You can have it on your side walls. You can have it on the garage wall that faces your front entry. You can have it on a courtyard. You can put it in the back. We just did not want it facing the street. And I know that that's a tough one. I wish we had more pictures to show you what has happened in other neighborhoods through the valley. We didn't. We just have this one. Somebody get a microphone?
Yeah, it's just an example. It is not.
That's siding. I think she's questioning the fact that it's not our development because there's siding on the home.
Yes, it's just
It was an example. One of the things that we had a hard time doing, well, it was an example of a piece of art.
Yeah, it's just from the internet. It's just an example of artwork on a home. It's not in Sun City.
Correct.
Yes.
The real question we'd like for you guys to talk about is, and this is the toughest thing we've got, is should we attach to the front of homes, which are the curbside appearance of your house, artwork of any kind? Because right now, all of it is forbidden. So should there be an allowance? And if so, how do we write that so that it achieves the purpose of keeping our place looking nice, but it might open us up to what somebody's opinion of artwork is. So anybody, yeah, you need a microphone. You got one.
Oh, I have the microphone. I wrote something to kind of make it go faster.
Good.
So I'd like to read this. I did get violations. I was violated by, there were 2. Sorry. Woo. All right, moving on. I have lived in my home as the original owner since August 2007. The design elements This is over my garage. I don't know if you can see it, but I can pass it around. That's all right. Okay. And this is on the side of my home. Okay? Yeah. And I'm happy to share it with you. Where am I? They were added to enhance and individualize the exterior when we moved in. During previous inspections of my home for ARC-approved projects, these items were never cited. Although the inspectors were not specifically looking for general violations of the guidelines, I'm sure that if my house were purple, or if I had installed 10 orange unicorns over the garage, I would have been cited. My neighbors have had the opportunity to complain via the blue card procedures, whatever you referred to that originally, if they found objectionable infractions on my home, but have not. Instead, I have received compliments about the tasteful decorative artwork. As members of the HOA, everybody in this community has the option to report any objectionable features. In the past, those blue card complaints were handled on a case-by-case basis, and apparently that's been successful. You mentioned that earlier.
Well, I didn't mention that it was successful in the in meeting the legal requirement for a consistent enforcement of our covenants. So,
okay, moving on.
I did say it had produced 900 last year or something like that.
Okay, moving on. To remedy this current situation, I suggest that established homes in the community that have not been cited prior to the proactive inspections be grandfathered in and left alone. With respect to possible guideline changes going forward, new homeowners should be apprised of the design guidelines and held accountable to them. According to most guidelines for professional decorators, the keep it odd rule is often referenced. I was cited because I had 3 items on the side instead of 2. And I can read that, but I won't. The ARC has set a precedent for amending the guidelines before concerning flag displays and changing the requirement of 2 trees in the front to 1. And I suggest that you look at especially having the odd rule on the side of a house, and then the small, not anything necessarily like that, on the fronts of homes.
Okay, thank you.
Here I am. I'll be right with you.
Can you make a rule about the height of the statues that are in front of some of the houses? Because we have some that are taller than me. I'm on patrol, and I drive this neighborhood every single week. There's lions that are growling, and they're about this tall. They have some more that are on the sides of the fences and everything that are too tall. Is there a way that you can make it so they can only be certain size?
We'll talk about that's coming up. We're going to talk about that.
And can I ask you this, because I don't know how much longer I can be here. I'm on patrol, so I drive this area. There are a lot of people who don't trim their trees, and you cannot see the street's name. And they're supposed to be in charge of that. If they have a reason where there's need to have a fire engine or something, they don't even know what street to turn on until they've passed it, because the limbs of the trees are laying over the signs.
Right.
Can that be written up?
No, well, that can be looked at, yes. I think someone else has raised the tree growth issue, which is a concern for a number of reasons. So that's something we can look at.
Hello.
You want to hold it?
Oh.
Okay, my name is Tom Darrow, and I live at 1871 Wood River Street. What a great community Anthem is. My wife Sue and I truly enjoy living here. Everything that is offered at the community center is truly first class. When we first came to Henderson and looked for a home, one of our priorities was to have a great view of the surrounding mountains and, of course, the lights of Las Vegas. We rented a home and searched every day for nearly 3 months until we found our home on Wood River Street. Of course, one thing that caught our eye was a great view of the Strip. The properties with views cost more money, and we were willing to pay the extra cost. The unfortunate thing that has occurred is that the trees from the surrounding properties grew and obstructed not only our view of the Strip, but that of our neighbors. One of my neighbors paid $17,500 more for the lot that he bought when he was one of the original owners, and it said so in the property that he bought. It said it was $17,500 more just for his lot. Most likely, without the view, the value today would probably decrease the value of our property. Fortunately, for our group, we were able to approach our neighbors on the streets below us, and most of them agreed to allow us to have the trees trimmed. Redwood Valley and Rice Valley Drive. These people were very gracious in allowing us to trim the trees. This cost us over $4,000 and maybe will last 2.5 years. Hopefully, they will agree to let us trim them again in the future. You have several existing restrictions regarding trees now. Should there also have these limits added? Height limits on existing trees, roof level only, no blocking the view of your neighbor. Any new trees that are planted should be trees that only grow so high. Should the community association be involved in paying for this to be done? Here's one big one. Restrict realtors from placing in their ads or on their signs view of the Strip, unless they can guarantee it for years to come. Thank you, Tom Darrow.
All right. Well, we'll look at all those issues about tree height and trimming of neighbors' trees because they block your view. There may be things we can do, and there may not be things we can do about that. I said we'll look at that. We'll have the art committee look at that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did too.
You know, and the thing about it is, it's not like the people that own the trees. It's not their responsibility, and we were very, very lucky to have our neighbors agree to allow us to trim the trees.
Sure.
And we're really thankful for that. However, you know, when you guys require people to have trees, you know, maybe it should be, like I said, trees that only grow so high, whatever. But it's very costly, and we paid more for our houses to have lots that have views.
I understand the problem. I do.
So hopefully you guys will take a real hard look at that and see what can be done about it.
Yes. Thank you.
I wanted to add this comment. Your CC&Rs, not your design guidelines. Literally, your CC&Rs say that views are not guaranteed. That's in there. So that's very problematic.
Hello. I'd like to get back to the artwork, if I may.
Yes, thank you.
First of all, there's been a great deal of talk, and I completely agree with it, that we want to keep the value of our homes up. I happen to think that some of, if not almost all of the artwork I've ever seen on houses has enhanced the neighborhood, not affected it negatively in any way. I think the idea of we're not going to allow any artwork on the front of the house on the off chance that some of them are in poor taste, and that's subjective, is not the way to approach it. And finally, what I think is very strange is that artwork in front of the house can only be seen if you're almost, well, directly in front of the house. So either my neighbors across the street or someone who's walking by and is in front of the house. Yet you can put any kind of artwork anywhere on the side of the house, on the side of casitas that are visible from all the way down the street, and that's okay.
I understand what you're saying.
That doesn't make sense to me. I'm sorry.
Hi, good morning. My name is Dan, and I'm a resident here for the last 2 years. My parents were residents here from the beginning, so I've been up in Anthem since the year 2000. I've watched tree heights in this community grow over the years. There's never been anything in the CCNRs that I know about regarding tree heights, but now that the community has matured to the point where homeowners that have paid premiums for their homes, for their views, and have lost their views, their home values have decreased. And I'd like to know why the association never has addressed tree heights in the past. Now it seems that homeowners are paying other homeowners to trim their trees, when that should not be the case. If you're a homeowner and you have a tree and you're obstructing another homeowner's view that they paid for, that homeowner should be responsible enough to maintain their trees. Now, you talk about all these other issues that basically are issues regarding removal or maintaining heights of smaller items, but when it comes to trees, some of these trees can grow as high as 100 feet, and they're not even addressed by the association. So I'd like to know why. Thank you.
I'd like to add one more thing to that. Coming from California, unfortunately, one of the things we dealt with all the time were fires. So we're very, very attuned to trees growing and touching each other. In some of these properties, you have trees where they've been planted too close together. If there's a fire on one tree, it's going to light the next one, the next one, and the next one, and it's going to continue to go down the street. So it's not only an issue of the tree height for aesthetic, but it's also a huge safety issue. We have a lot of dry season out here. We have, you know, it's hot. These trees can dry out. Not everybody maintains them. So that's another thing that I would think that you would want to take into consideration. These trees need to be manicured. They have to be trimmed and maintained. That way there's no issue from a safety perspective as well.
Okay, I'm going to break in here because we're running out of time and we still have 2 more categories to go through, and trees wasn't one of the things that we were expecting to talk about today until the end. But so does anybody else have anything on the artwork?
Yes. My concern is the artwork guidelines. In my courtyard, I have 5 pieces of artwork, which are beautiful, and everybody loves them. And you're trying to tell me that I can only have 2 in my courtyard, in which you can hardly even see it. And I do really think you need to review your artwork guidelines, because really 2 just, usually it's 3. You hang pictures of 3 together, not 2. So it's just needs to be changed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Should we move on, Rex, to number 5?
No, wait a minute.
Can I go?
Oh, Wendy, go ahead. You got it. You got the mic.
Trees have been talked about a lot, and my request to get through the rest of this kind of follows what Candace said. It's like 9 minutes to 12. If one person said something and Rex said we're going to look at the trees, then trust him. Don't have to repeat it.
Okay, let's move on.
Hello.
Well, I think we understand that. And as I said, I've got some personal experience with it. So, all right, I understand what you. I apologize. And I apologize for that. I apologize for that. No, let's not. We don't need colloquy among. We don't need people arguing with each other here. Go ahead, sir.
Getting in with the artwork, I agree with the lady. Aesthetically, 3 is better. It's either 1 or 3 if you get into that.
Yeah, that's
concerning the artwork and actually anything else. Is there a methodology in place that if you want something changed, you have to go to your neighbors and have them address it also and sign off as special on artwork?
I don't believe so.
That would be something the board would like to look at, that if you get your neighbors, the people that live across the street, if they agree with that artwork, then come to the board, then it's approved.
Well, that's a thought. Yeah, we'd have to look at that.
Okay, we have one more lady, and then we're going to move on.
Okay, try not to repeat what's been said about the artwork. I just want to make a general point that most houses are painted these desert colors that have, there is no life in them. If there is no artwork that's permitted in the front of the houses or a certain amount of work, we all look, I don't want to say dead. That's a wrong term in this community. Cookie cutter and very boring. And when we moved here about 6 years ago, one of the things that attracted us was also the beauty of the artwork that was on the wall. So I am asking the committee to seriously reconsider the number and where it can be placed. Thank you.
Thanks.
That's an easy consideration.
All right.
Okay, let's go to Patty. Let's go to number 5.
Okay, patio.
Get closer to your mic. Let's move to number 5. Patio furniture. This is an interesting discussion now. Patio furniture is allowed in the entryways and original developer-installed front porches and patios. They're allowed in courtyards that are surrounded by a wall, fence, or hedge at least 3 feet in height. They are allowed in any area of the rear yard. The picture is showing an example of furniture. And I know that's about as elementary a picture as you can get. I'm sure there's going to be questions on this subject.
We just got a citation for a cement granite bench that has been there for probably 7 or 8 years. There is no way that that is considered patio furniture. So I'd like, you know, if it's a bench that, yes, you can put in your patio or whatever, such as something like that, that's fine. But a bench that is cement, this thing probably weighs 400, 500 pounds. I wouldn't put that on my patio. So I think you need to relook at what you consider as patio furniture. And that's all I have.
I think the key word there was bench.
Right. But it's a very, it's an artwork.
Yeah, what's your name, by the way?
Pardon me?
You know, we've been remiss not asking people to state their name and their village when they talk. But
we live in Mountain View.
I wanted to call you by name. That's why I asked you.
Harriet.
Harriet?
Harriet.
The next topic that we're going to go to is landscape accessories, and this is where we get into some nomenclature problems. A bench could be called a landscape accessory, correct, as opposed to patio furniture. Correct. But other people might say, no, that's patio furniture. It's a matter of defining the terms a little better. So we tend to use some terms in these guidelines that aren't definitional. They're not. We don't have a glossary of terms that we have a definition for them. So I think the place to talk about the bench, for instance, is as a...
No, we were cited for patio furniture.
Okay.
Is what the citation said.
All right, and so, the point I'm getting at is that you could also make the argument that that is not a patio furniture, that is a landscape accessory, and that would be a perfectly logical argument. But it just goes to show you that we've got to take a look at all of these things very carefully, because some of them seem to be maybe contradictory at times, is my point.
So
and that's what we want to look at.
So we can appeal it.
That's what we want to look at.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Judith Albert. I live in Tall Mesa, and I received a violation. And my problem has not been addressed here at all. I have a peach tree that I planted in 2003 when I moved here. Now, if you have any kind of fruit, you know that it has to be protected. So I have PVC piping that has lasted 16 years, and I have netting over it. And I was told that I have to remove it. Now, what's going to happen to my peaches? The birds are going to get them. They're going to fall on the ground. The rats will eat them. And I don't want that. I want my peaches. Now, the only thing that I can suggest It'll be a lot of work for me, but I'm willing to do it. I will paint the white PVC piping green so that it'll match with all of the surrounding areas. Yeah, the green grass, yes. The picture that was taken was from my neighbor's front yard. If you look straight out, stand on my sidewalk and look out, you do not see the trees at all. So I'd like to have some type of answer, because I only have to the 10th of this month to do something, otherwise I will be in violation. So what do you suggest that I do?
James?
I request you submit for an extension.
I did.
More time? All right, then
And
your
never
extension was
received a
granted.
reply.
Okay,
Next.
I can look into that, but we would definitely be glad to grant you that extension. And I believe we spoke
Can I get
about-
that in writing?
Yeah, definitely.
I've already sent it in. Did you receive my paperwork?
I'll have to look into that. We could discuss this after the meeting. I have no problem with that, but we'll definitely grant you that extension.
Okay, so then I don't have to take this down by the 11th of this month.
That is correct.
You all hear that? Thank you.
Good day. Similar to the lady up front, I also had a park bench, a cement bench. It went about 300 pounds. I went to the review board because I got a violation. There's two members, if you're not familiar, that will review your plans to get it. What you just described happened. One member said, oh, it's a decorative bench. One member said it's patio furniture. They had to bring in a third person
To break the tie.
to break the tie. Then the fourth person came, and then the fifth person came. The bench is now in my backyard, and my wife and I had a fun privilege of moving that 300-pound bench, i.e. I lost, but I'm in code. I think we need to look at the definition, the park benches, decorative benches, whatever the wording is, on stone benches. It looked nice. All my neighbors loved it. They even asked, where'd your bench go? Yeah, we lost the battle. The other park benches that are wrought iron and wood, that you see numerous of them, and I know that at least one of our friends got a violation on that. They had to move that. I think we need to look at it. Patio furniture, not the little web patio aluminum furniture. I don't think that needs to be in people's front yards. I think everyone would agree with that. So I would plead that we reword it, relook into it, and when it's approved, we'll move the bench back to our front yard. That would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Thanks.
Are we done with this topic?
If I could, I'd like to make a comment on the outdoor patio furniture. I'm Jan Jansen. We moved in 2003, January. We submitted our landscaping plan in February. It was approved. Included on that was an 85 square foot flagstone in cement patio. We put a pup table out there.
Jan, a little closer to your mouth.
The microphone.
We put the pup table and chairs out there in March. In 2011, received a first notice. It said improvements have been made without prior written consent of the ARC. You have installed a front concrete courtyard without ARC approval. Front courtyards are only allowed behind a courtyard wall or fence. Well, the rule itself says outdoor patio furniture in the front of the house is allowed in entryways and original developer installed front porches or patios. Now, to me, that's favored status over the rest of the people. Gary very kindly, the first violation was removed because we had it on our plan. Then Gary wrote us up a couple months ago for the pub table and chairs that we've had out there since 2003. He said no problem with that because it had been there well before the rule had changed. But I think you ought to take a hard look at this rule. I don't think it applies, something separate should apply to people who bought
a house that had a patio installed versus those of us who went to the extent of putting it in, and then they wanted you to put in a wall or a hedge or something like that. But it just doesn't seem right.
Right. Okay, well, I understand your point, Jan. Thank you. Okay, want to go to the next one? Because this is just as much fun. Oh, I'm sorry. David.
Hi, Rex.
I've heard enough from you anyway.
I'd like to make a suggestion to address one specific possible problem, just one limited issue. And that concerns the people who buy second homes here, who come in and are not buying, they're buying a resale, and they don't know what's going on.
Correct.
I believe, if I'm correct, the current policy is that homeowners, when they purchase a home, have to pay a one-time $100 fee now for possible future ARC involvement on any issues that they may have. I'd like to suggest that when someone buys a home under these circumstances and they pay the $100 fee, that one thing that comes with it is an ARC visit or a compliance visit to the new homeowner to inspect the home and look at it and see if there are any issues they need to know about, and either bring them to the attention of the new home purchaser or sign off on a document that says they've been certified at that time to have no compliance issues.
That's an issue. We've actually addressed that issue.
Okay. We've talked to realtors about that, David, and one of the problems might be the buyer would want that inspection before he signs the contract, because he could get the owner, the seller, to pay for it, and it's very difficult to get that kind of control with realtors. They would have to be the ones that would bring people to us before they pay their $100 or whatever. So it's a good idea, and we've thought about that, but I'm not sure there's a solution around that, making it consistent application of policy. Yes, sir. You got a question? Right here. Oh, over there. Sorry.
Hi, Jeff Graber, moved 2003, original owner. But I just agree with what Dave said, but it should be the seller getting this and paying for it, so you can certify to the buyer that everything's okay as of that date.
We offer that. We offer that service now, and has been in our design guidelines that any seller prior to selling their home can request that, and myself and an ARC member would go out and inspect the entire property and then give them a certificate of compliance that they can include for the new homeowner.
Correct.
Towards that end, Austin Scheibel, Tall Mesa. The seller, the Sun City Homeowners Association can, at closing, require a document of authentication that the home is in compliance. If you simply put that as the closing documents, then all charges, fees, etc., to put the home in compliance would be borne by the seller, and the home would be all set for the new purchaser.
Thank you.
Yes, I live in Southridge Village. My concern is with landscape accessory features, okay? And I'd like to address item 4 of materials on page 22, item 4C, privacy screening for fences and gates. And my concern is, it says here in section 1 under item C, only perforated metal screening is allowed for privacy screening of fences and gates. May be applied only on the inside of the requester's fence. My concern is, first of all, perforated screening is a methodology of stamping metal to a given pattern. Okay, my research has shown that perforated screening is roughly 8 times the cost of galvanized wire screening. I would like to strongly suggest that we drop off the comment of perforated metal screening. It's galvanized wire. If it's painted to the color of the wrought iron fence in the front, it doesn't show, particularly from 25 feet, unless you've got a telescope on it. And whether it's an 1/8-inch hole or a 1/4-inch hole or a 1/2-inch pattern should be immaterial as long as it's not offensive and doing the job. I put up pattern screening when we first had rabbit infestation into our front courtyard, into the plants that were being eaten alive. It was a non-metal screening. I don't understand even the objection to non-metal screening as long as it's painted to the specifications of the wrought iron fence. So in summary, I'd like to ask for a removal of the perforated metal screening identification. The galvanized wiring is 1/8 the cost, and many of us are on fixed incomes. Thank you.
Okay, I'll make a note of that. Thank you. Okay.
Line 6.
Any other questions about landscape accessory features? You'll notice that the ARC approval is required for anything that goes in the front of the yard. And of course, then you've got your pictures that you're going to use, or a plan that you draw up that identifies the compliance with the rest of the rules here. Now, somebody raised the question of, who was it, about the height of the statues and stuff? Was that you? Oh, now you want to talk about it? Oh. Oh, well, considering that one with a maximum height of 5 feet is allowed,
correct,
next to the home, which is maybe we need to be more specific what next to the home means, but or the entryway of the home. Now, the ones you see, do they meet that particular restriction, or they're outside of that restriction? Okay. They're out. I'm sorry. They're outside the courtyard, right? Or in the front yard. And they're how high? Well, that says 5 feet there. No, okay. Okay. But you think they're real tall? Yeah. All right. And so these are the things. Gary, can you comment on what happens at the plan review session when people bring in landscape accessories that they've got a picture of, or they're drawing of, or how is that approved?
When you want to put landscape accessories in your front yard, of course, you're going to bring an application and pictures of the product that you want to put in your front yard. It's going to go to the ARC Planning Review Committee. Larry and Donna is this year's chairman, due to an inconvenience this morning, couldn't make it. They're going to look at it. They're going to look at the product. They're going to look at the dimensions. They're going to look at this and that. They're also going to look at the application. Where are you going to put it? As the guideline states, excuse me for moving away from that, you're allowed one item with a maximum height of 5 feet. When you put it up against your courtyard wall, particularly the two pillars that support your gate, we look at those a little differently, but we try to keep those within 30 inches. And we allow for that. Anything behind the courtyard wall, we even try to review that carefully too. But everything that you want to put in your front yard, if Donna and her committee recommends to us approval based on specification, installation, quantity, and location, when it comes to the ARC board, which is my board, or not my board, it's your board, I just happen to be the chairman. If they recommend approval, we're gonna support that and recommend approval. One of these items is next to your place?
I may be more specific, because we're speaking
Oh, microphone, please.
Oh, thank you. If I may be more specific, because we're citing the same thing. They are ferocious temple dogs with their mouths open. They're just horrible, but they're somebody's idea of they meet someone's aesthetic idea of what you should have in your front
Are
yard.
you describing Chinese shishi? Because that's what it sounds like.
There you go.
Yeah,
I don't like those shishi dogs.
You realize they're fortunes of good luck, but anyway.
But
yeah.
they're
But
not
if they're
my
over
good
5
luck
feet,
when I
know.
have to look at
See you.
If
they're
over
really
5 feet,
excessive.
yeah.
I mean, you talk about a lot of things that are in people's front yards, and this is, it's really over the top. It really
So
is.
you-
My excuse for all the years that I put in complaints, and that's why I referenced the religious. There was a 98-year-old Asian woman that lived in the house, and these were supposed to give her peace, so nothing was done.
Yes.
I don't think that's a good basis for things, but that was what I was always told.
But you've identified a problem here, and that is,
Yes.
you've got people on the committee, subcommittee, making an aesthetic judgment, I take it. That's how they got approved. Somebody looked at it and thought it was okay?
I don't think they've ever been approved. I mean, these were original owners, and the woman lived there with caretakers for many years. Her children still own the house. They're still there. They're in quote-unquote remembrance of her. So, I mean, I think there's some questions there about whether they should.
But my point was, even if it requires some aesthetic approval, yes or no, the problem of defining what is aesthetically pleasing in a regulation is very, very difficult.
Very tough.
And so, we can't have the aesthetic police being another committee of the board, that's going. You want to volunteer?
I'm right there.
Okay, but that's the difficulty of trying to impose aesthetic standards on people. And that's why I guess in the first place they said nothing on the front of a house, and when in fact there's a lot of stuff on the fronts of houses that might be aesthetically pleasing. So this is the difficulty for the board and for the art committee to write these things in such a way that we meet everybody's expectations.
They violate everything that you've said.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions about there? You go.
When you reissue the guidelines, could you please make a comprehensive list of what an accessory is? Because that's the only thing in this entire guideline book that's unclear.
That is the challenge we face.
Well, that gets back to the nomenclature of some of these common things that are talked about here. Do they require a definitional listing? And then people can go back to that and find out what it really means. So.
Okay, we're going to Webster's. Oh. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that since this meeting is supposed to be to reestablish the guidelines or look at them, and some people have gotten what seems to be threatening letters about liens and losing their privileges, maybe you could have a moratorium on the dates so that they have time to appeal and see what your guidelines are and not have this threat over them.
Thank you.
I hate to be redundant, but I have no idea what an accessory is. I mean, when you've talked about patio furniture, okay. I lived in Cleveland for a while, and one side was entirely Polish, and I know those well.
Thank you. Now you know one of the things we face constantly. What is an accessory?
Okay, one in the back, and then one
yeah.
here, and we got to move on.
Okay. Linda Krivik from Big Sky. I just wanted a quick follow-up on what the woman just said about basically the process. For those of us who received violation notices and have gotten extensions, is there going to be a review of all of these guidelines and new guidelines issued before we have to make a decision on removing something?
Well, the quick answer is I'm not sure. We face, and I'm not trying to be clever about that, there's a board election right now going on, and so it's very difficult for the current board to kind of look ahead and say, we're going to do this at this time and whatnot, because the composition of the board could be different when next month rolls around. So it's even, I can make my comments on what maybe I think here, but they may not, if I'm not reelected to the board, it doesn't do any good to talk about that. So I'm not sure, Linda, and I wish I could give you a more definite answer than that. But at least if you've asked for an extension for what appear to be reasonable reasons, I know James is a reasonable guy, and he's giving a few of those out for perhaps part of that reason. So.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, like Rex said, we don't have a time frame, but right after the 23rd meeting, we will definitely schedule right away for the full ARC, the subcommittee, and the new board members to get together and discuss the possible changes of the design guidelines.
I think.
One more, okay.
Hi, my name's Laura, and we live in Pinnacle. I just wanted to say that I'm not going to go into the tree thing, but that I brought up the tree thing a year ago, and what I was told was, well, this is how it is. We put it in the original guidelines, and we can't do anything about it. So I'm really grateful that you guys are listening, and maybe we'll get some changes. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Did you have one more comment?
About appealing the dates. My name is Dina Gorlick. I live on Weaverville Drive. I've been appealing. I got the first letter. I appealed. I went to the Covenants Committee was the first thing they told me to do. Then I appealed and got a 60-day extension, which ARC approved. Now my date, because my original letter was beginning of January, and here we are in the middle of April, my next appeal is to the board, and that's scheduled for April 27th. So I'm caught, and I'm reluctant to take that thing down over the front of the garage because I'm going to have to paint.
Well, come to the board. Come to the board on the 27th. Is my advice to you.
There is no board meeting on the 27th.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm scheduled to see the board on the 27th.
The 27th is a Saturday.
Well,
So I'm thinking you're talking about the 25th. That's when our board meeting is.
I don't know. I have a letter. I thought it was the 27th.
Just don't show up on Saturday.
I will. I won't. But it's the end of April.
Can I say something? Sorry. During that appeal process, everything is put on hold. So I wouldn't worry about if your extension ran out of time or anything. While you're appealing to the board, everything is put on hold. So don't worry about that for now.
I appreciate the opportunity to let the homeowners have more input into the changing of the guidelines. Thank you very much.
So I'm going to have to hasten this along. I've got something else I've got to go to at 1 o'clock today that's going to cause me a quick drive. So we've talked a little bit about how you up front solve these problems by always coming to the ARC subcommittee for pre-approval of any changes you want to make to your property. And moving forward, that's going to be a real good idea for everybody because it'll eliminate almost all the violations we're going to run into. So I'm not going to get into a lot of detail on this, but what's the next slide there?
That's just the end.
Well, there's.
How to ensure it.
I think on those slide, you're talking about the compliance slide?
No, I'm talking about the next one that talks about we want you to continue to talk to the Community Standards Department or the administration when you've got any questions or problems, because that's the easiest way to take care of it. And also, again, the ARC subcommittee meets twice a month, and they're very easy to sit down and talk with about whatever problems or concerns that you've got. The next meeting is on the 23rd. We hope it will get a few more people that haven't been at this meeting because we want to generate as much feedback as we can. But all of you are welcome to come back for that meeting too, if you wish to share any additional thoughts you might have with us. Now, one of the things we've developed as part of our communication process is a request. If you have an interest in filling out a form, the forms are available at the table over here, or you can go on the website and respond to the association about whether how can we make these workshops more effective, I guess. We certainly could get more people here than we got today, so that's very rewarding. But if there are any other suggestions you've got for how to make this process a little more meaningful to the community, we'd love to hear about them. So, Candace?
Well, we want to thank you all for coming. If you know of any neighbors that are having issues, tell them the 23rd is when they'll be heard, and we will be back here. So thank you very much.